The retire of Theresa May has precise ensuing consequences for the prudent side. The start gun on a management competition has been fired. But which does it indicate for Brexit? The brief reply is how both of no transactions and no Brexit are now both of more than potential. In Mrs. May's brave new Brexit schedule in RAG, down there is no car for outgoing the EU in a transactions, and the failure is how the UK's affiliation will elapse on Halloween. If how is wherever things seem to be header in the fall, several MPs who previous opposed a other plebiscite might revise if it is the top stock option for avoiding no transactions, setting Brexit at hazard. Following all, Jeremy Corbyn, who has been unwilling to weaponize Labour's stock option of a social voice, has told the Labour management would behind a plebiscite to escape each a bad Tory transactions or no transactions at all. But Mrs. May named on all sides of the discussion to discover a trade-off. The issue is if, in the brief period, the tongue of trade-off is seen as an property or obligation by the prudent management contenders. But voting testimony suggests lot of the prudent local members don't fair wish Brexit to occur rapidly, but they favorably favor outgoing out of a departure treaty. One-day MPs include whittled downward the contenders to the definitive 2 in June. Winner above the side loyal will need the left candidates to say hard. The will indicate, at the really low, how no transactions is behind on the spreadsheet. If, for example, the final competition was among a ex-Remainer and a Brexiter, say Jeremy Surge or Sajid Javid against Boris Johnson or Dominic Raab, later to assault their enemy on a broad band of issues, consisting suitability for top office space, the ex-Remainer would include to disassemble any obstacle to their supporting among the broad affiliation by tension their readiness to keep in no transactions. The one nationality team of Conservative Party, who are substantially ex-Remainers such as Nicky Morgan and Succinnick Rudd, refuge T controlled out supporting Boris Johnson, so length as he pivots to the stance of at low disputing for a transactions in the EU. So, allows fair suppose for a time how the is the stance any heir to Mrs. May adopts. The just release of the entering PM's transactions that gun the House of Commons was at the end of January, though was the as-called Brady correction, following the President of the Conservative Party 1922 board Sir Graham Brady, that named for a transactions and supporting for the departure treaty, but negative the controversial Northern Irish supporting. The supporting is scorned by lot Brexiters as it would hold the UK shut to EU regulation in the lack of a trading transactions. Next how voice, Mrs. May told, down there is a bounded appetite suppressant for changing in the EU, and negotiations it win to be lightweight. She was order on both of counts. Time down there were further reassurances of Brussels about the supporting, down there was no main override, never reason substituted in undefined option institutional arrangement. Currently, Mr. Johnson believes how more than strong negotiating is required and that could open a transactions. Mr. Javid believes engineering solutions to the issue of Irish boundary checks already exist, but how the EU would include to recognize the anxiety is so distant, the perspective of a changing of lead hasn't led to a changing of reason in Brussels. And the Irish Vice Main Secretary, Simon Coveney, is already precautionary how the Europe Association would not propose the following Main Secretary a superior Brexit transactions. He said an Irish wireless plant, the concept how a new Main Secretary will be a stricter mediator and will put it up to the EU and get a lot superior transactions for Britain. How's not how the EU plant, which he told the EU would ponder is a much longer expansion of Paper 50, and a future latency to Brexit. A new prudent lead devoted to a transactions may so include to ask for they would start their rent in number 10 at the altitude of the Europe feast time of year, and period will be brief for any reconsideration. Yet, except the EU is readily to resume the departure treaty agreed in Mrs. May, down there may be slight spot in length, painted out discussions. Mr. Johnson affirmed he wouldn't ask for an expansion in any instance, declaration how the UK would keep on October 31st in or out of a transactions. It's probable several of the legal work for a next transactions will be made for the moribund days of Mrs. May's premiership. For example, uncontentious aspects of the departure treaty, such as individuals' rights, could be turned on in UK Act. But the controversial issues would stay. Arrogant a significantly various transactions isn't on proposed by October, and the Conservative Party are led by a Brexiter who will go out of the EU no question, which, we could be florid in the next scenarios. Mrs. May alerted of department and ambiguity if MPs didn't undergo her transactions. In how honour, at law, she was order.